and the Los Angeles office. Currently, I'm in charge of the LA office. That's our #1 office in the US. So I mean, things are very exciting. Just a quick announcement, we broke our global sales record, 11,000 units, which has never happened before. So great job everybody. Also, my own office, Los Angeles, we hit 1,155 units, which is also a record for that office. So this is things are great. Sales are improving, more people are getting the message about Enagic, and a lot of exciting things are happening, so welcome. First up, I'd like to introduce Mojka Renaud. She's from Florida. She's a natural health practitioner. She's from Slovenia, and she's here to say a few words, about what she does and about our company and just about improving your health. So please, big round of applause.
Hello everybody, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so proud of Colton and Laura, whom we met in Orlando when they still used to live there. And then they came over here and started this whole big group of people. So I'm so happy to be here and represent health. I'm all about health. That's what got me into it, is my health was at stake, and I started finding ways to improve myself and not go through toxic drug therapy. So I got into this, and I've been looking for really clean water for many, many years. I've been studying structured water for years and years, and it wasn't until I actually got introduced to Kangen that I actually saw some changes in patients and immediately saw some amazing things that were happening with them. So I've been accumulating information about clustered water, or as we call it, structured water, for so many years, probably close to 30 years, almost as long as I've been practicing. Because coming from Europe, we have glacial waters over there. And this is something that's not over here. We just took it for granted over there. So I remember as a child, we would be standing outside in the wintertime with this fountain where the water was continuously running. And it would run with full force into a trough. And we would just go out there and grab some pitchers and bring the water inside. And that's what we drank. And that was glacial waters. And we weren't always very healthy. We never were sick. I remember I missed a single day in school up to age 18. It's when I went to plant forest trees with my grandfather. So I was never sick. And I tried to raise my kids that way. Earth has everything we need to get ourselves well. We just have to tap into that and use it. And of course, water is our #1 substance that we need to maintain our health, or actually to get our health back if we don't have it. So that's what always made me very interested, to have a carrier in the office that I can recommend to my patients that would actually work to get the nutrients into the system. But the water is always so toxic that you couldn't use it as a carrier to get nutrition in. So that's why I was always researching what kind of water do we use. Never saw a big impact. So that's what kind of got me into health, and some personal challenges where I got really messed up with conventional medicine. I didn't want any part of it anymore. So I came to this country to learn languages and studied for languages and translated that for a while. And just accidentally, because of getting my own health back, I went more the natural route. So this is where I am today, and I've been practicing now 30 years. Can you people hear me? Oh, everybody?
A little bit.
Let me raise it up just a little bit here. Was that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I made a DVD and I wrote a book about some of the things with water that everybody needs to be aware of. So this information I'm going to give you, you're not going to see on NBC News or national news, because this is information they a lot of times don't want you to know, because it might help you get better and healthier, right? And you don't make any money. You make money selling drugs, not selling health. So this might be something you need to consider to try to maintain yourself. So are we facing a catastrophic illness? If you start looking at statistics, you're going to see it's looking pretty grim. As much money and wealth as we have in the United States, our health is not getting better, it's getting worse. And there's obviously some flaws with this whole system. So let's take a look at this. I have to do this statement here first because so everybody is aware that what I'm presenting is what I have personally researched for many, many years, not something that we would read in other manuals, although there's many manuscripts that exist. But just for the purpose of what we have to do, this is a disclaimer for the FDA. So please know that this presentation is not intended to treat or cure any disease, nor subject matter, be taking his medical advice. Please consult your physician as you deem necessary. So let's look at the leading causes of disease in the U.S. So if you look, the point of working, heart disease, 616,000, cancer, 562,000, and then stroke, and then other diseases. Obviously, heart disease and cancer is leading the disease picture, and you will see that a lot of it, as we go through it, it has to do with your nutrition and health, the toxic environment. So 1 million people are diagnosed with cancer every year in the United States. So 1 in 3 will develop cancer in their lifetime. Now, why is it getting worse instead of getting better, right? So these are the cancer rates earlier. In 1900, 1 in 20 had cancer. In 1940, 1 in 16. 1970, 1 in 10. In the year 2000, 1 in 6. In 2020, 1 in 3 men and 1 in 2 women will have cancer. So if you don't do something, this is not my statistics, just stuff that I collected from here and there. So if you don't do something now, you will be one of these statistics. So let's look at the root causes of illness. In holistic medicine, we always look for, let's not treat symptoms with drugs, because it's only going to last a little while and then it's not going to work anymore, right? And underneath, your body will succumb to illness. So we're always looking for root causes. So for years and years, we would say maybe it's this or that and that, and experiment a little bit with this and that and that. But the bottom line is inflammation. And now the medical doctors are also starting to learn what inflammation is all about. We've been talking about this for many, many years. But you have to know what is causing inflammation. So inflammation is the root cause of all these diseases, whether it's cancer or autoimmune, arthritis, any of these. Okay, so you read about this, Time magazine, there's charts and graphs, you're starting to see how, the inflammation is going up. So it's not too new anymore. Last 5-10 years, it's starting to come more to the surface. So where does it all begin? In the gut. This is your primary focus. I remember Dr. Bernard Jensen, a chiropractor, one of our original clinical nutritionists, was always saying that all disease starts in the colon. Well, at that time, we didn't really quite know what he meant by that. So as years progressed, we started to get more understanding of inflammation in the intestines and what that leads to. Because the intestinal tract is the one that sorts out all your food and absorbs, and that's what you live on. That's what your whole body sustains itself on. So if that's not working, if that has a defect, something is going to go wrong along the line. So inflammatory bowel disease, very common problems, stomach problems, esophagitis, Barrett's esophagus, acid reflux, all those are very common problems. I would say in a clinical situation, 3 out of 5 people that come in will present themselves with symptoms of gastritis, or H. pylori, which is actually the bacteria that can cause gastritis. And that bacteria is found pretty much in everybody. They can test it nowadays just by a breathalyzer, and they can detect you have that bacteria. So why isn't everybody sick with it? It depends very much on your immune system. When your stress is high, the bacteria starts growing more, and it will go into the small intestine, duodenum, and it will hide there. And then it goes to the stomach and starts causing inflammation and ulcers. The more stress you have, it brings it out. And then you control it with a medication like Prilosec, one of those drugs. But it only controls the inflammation, but it doesn't kill the bacteria, and it doesn't reduce that inflammation. It just blocks the acid. When you block the acid, you don't absorb food. And I've had many patients who have been on these drugs for several years, where they're to a point when their constitution, their whole body immune system is so weak that they can no longer absorb anything. And then they end up with a major surgery where they move parts of the colon or the intestinal tract, and they just can't function. They function maybe 1 or 2 hours per day. So again, if you have to be on a drug, it should be very short term if there's not a choice, and come off it, find out what the causes are, fix it, and then come off the drug so it doesn't cause long-term damages. Okay, so here's we're going to talk a lot about GMO food today, because I think from what we have learned in the last 10 years, it's one of the worst things that is happening in our society that's killing us from every direction, and we have actually almost no control over it other than the choices that you make. 80% of the food in the supermarket is GMO, and as we talk about it later, we'll see it's even in the rainwater, so it's hard to avoid. But here's some pictures that I found from a pig. This is a pig's stomach, and you can see just a slightly pink coating there. And this is a very red and inflamed lining. And this is just 3 weeks on genetically modified foods, grains. So if this is doing that to a pig, isn't the same thing happening with our body too? Okay, so destruction of the mucosal lining of the gut is the key. So when you eat things or you get exposed to toxins or whatever it might be that causes the lining to be damaged, you're going to get ulcerative colitis or cancer or whatever. But here's an interesting article I found. See, it talks about the risk of cancer. It increases with the duration of the disease and how much the colon has been damaged. For example, if only the lower portion of the colon or rectum are involved, the risk of cancer is no higher than normal. However, if the entire colon is involved, the risk of cancer may be as much as 32 times the normal rate. So they know this. They have, you'll read these little articles in many different medical journals. So here's a little magnified picture of the intestinal tract. This is the villi. This is what lines the intestinal tract. And they sort out the food, either push the food along or they release enzymes that you absorb. And they have to be intact. It's kind of like a little wave that moves the food along. That's the villi. When they become damaged, then all these particles that you're normally not supposed to eat can go through the intestinal lining and attach as inflammation enzyme or inflammatory substances that will cause that. Any type of arthritis, that's inflammation. That means you have toxic substances floating around that are not supposed to be there, and they're attaching to the joints or the mucous membranes of any lining of the organs. So leaky gut is the bottom line. Okay, let's go to the next one here. There's a couple more pictures. These are the nice evil things that the microbes that form. So the more destruction you have in the intestinal lining, the more it promotes an overgrowth of bad bacteria, fungi like Candida, or even cancer cells. So here the root causes, again, just as a summary of inflammation, can be caused by many things. The diet, sugar, alcohol, drugs, because they don't damage the lining. Stress, especially like antibiotics, because they're very notorious to damage the intestinal lining. If you get like one Z-Pack, it can take you 50 years to get the residue of those antibiotics out of the intestinal lining. Penicillin has tentacles that can spread through the intestinal lining and permanently attach to your lining. Let's see what's up.
Can you just went forward?
I think you need to go a little bit back here. Oops, there we go. Okay, these things are so sensitive, you can barely touch them. Okay, so the drugs, they play a lot of havoc in the system. Your stress, then grains and starches. Now, there could be also starches that are healthy starches. They are, internally, they convert to sugars. And we already eat too many of those. When I test people on my computer systems that I have, if I test the diets, it always comes up the person needs more protein and less carbohydrates, because we're a carbohydrate society. That's what we eat most of the time. It makes a difference if you have something that's organic or not organic, but you can still eat too many starches altogether, so keep that in mind too. Okay, then processed food, we all know how bad that can be. There's sometimes ingredients in there you can't even pronounce. More than a sixth of our food is not even food. And then environmental things would be pesticides, heavy metals, chemicals, toxic skincare products, and cleaning products, and then parasites, bacteria. All these things can be absorbed through the skin very rapidly. And they did tests in Germany where in 15 seconds, if you put something on the skin, it would show up in an organ. For example, they took some thyroid cuttings from an animal and they would make them radioactive and absorb it and put it, smudged it on a person's body. And in 15 seconds, it showed up in the thyroid. So it knew right where to go. So those are intrinsic factors that the body recognizes immediately and pulls them in. So if you put in these chemical toxins like that, the body doesn't know what to do with that because it's a foreign material. We don't have any genetic coding how to deal with chemicals. So consequently, these chemicals stay in your body. So when I test a patient, the highest numbers that we always see is pesticides, chemicals, heavy metals, and pharmaceutical drugs, because they don't leave the system. So you need something to pull those out. Okay, and the gut-brain connection, we start to have more understanding of how important that is. Anything that happens in the gut will affect the brain. Serotonin is something that you need to feel good, to be happy, to sleep better with. It's for depression. It's a natural neurotransmitter for depression. When 90% of your serotonin is formed in your gut. So if there's some problem with malabsorption and stuff like that, you will not make serotonin. No wonder that 90% of the population is low in serotonin, because all these toxins are interfering with the production of serotonin. And then the depression, major depression that we have nowadays, in young kids already. Now it's suicides and everything, There's a lot to be said about some of these murders that are being committed, like the last incident they had with this German pilot flying the plane into the mountains, right, a young guy. When I first read the article, I said, I bet you he was on some kind of psychiatric drugs. And sure enough, because these drugs make you indifferent to your environment, they don't let you be yourself, and they don't care if they pull someone else into that with them. That's just the effect of these drugs. And I've collected over 60 incidences so far that we've been able to link to that person being on some type of psychotic drug, like the Columbine High School incident where he shot all those other kids, So it's really sad, and to think about that when we put young kids on these drugs. They don't know what effect these drugs have. They might not even be aware. Some of them say, I don't remember anything. They're so out of it. It takes total control of your body. There's so many other things we could do to improve their nutrition. If you just improve the nutrition, you could probably improve 70 to 80% of those behaviors, if not more. Okay, so let's go a step further. So water and earth, the two most basic elements of life, to give hydration and to give nourishment. Those two everybody needs. And whatever water comes in contact with, it's going to pick up and carry into our body, right, from everywhere. So since water is in contact with the whole environment, everything that's out there gets in everybody's body. So the most harmful chemical threats right now, we're going to talk a lot about that. There's so many chemicals they could talk about. Each one, in time, they figure out that each chemical causes a damage of some kind. Like recently, they just found out that triclosan, which is an antibacterial chemical that's found in every soap and bathrooms, and it's in Dawn dishwashing liquid, it's in Colgate toothpaste. That's actually an extremely toxic chemical that causes tumors and cancers very fast. And it's been out on the market for over 30 years. Now they're finally going to put it off the market. So they're always discovering something new. We know they're bad, but we can't do anything about it until finally a group of people care enough to put some information out there and say, we need to get that off the market. Okay, so these two really bad chemicals we've been dealing with that are causing most of the degenerative diseases is, we call them gender benders or xenoestrogens. Okay? They cause the feminization of fish, animals, and people, genetic mutations, we talk about that a lot, endocrine abnormalities and formation of tumors and cancers. And where are they found? Okay, just some examples. Aerial spraying and spraying of our crops. And here are some of the most common ones. You probably have heard of these a lot, the bisphenol A, the most studied chemical in the world to be an endocrine disruptor. Phthalates, all your plastics, right? It's hard to even find things that doesn't have plastics. You go to the store, everything's in plastic. And then parabens in skincare, PCBs in skincare as well as many other places. Bleaching compounds, dioxins, and pesticides, herbicides, and heavy metals. And there's many, I just listed 3 of them there, but there's many. Those are all very common. At one time we thought bisphenol A is an endocrine disruptor. We didn't think any of the others have the same capacity to be an endocrine disruptor. Now it's almost every chemical that they're researching, the bottom line is it's an endocrine disruptor. Okay, so here's just some things about bisphenol A, everything that's been linked to. I think most of you have probably learned a lot about that by now, so we can skip over that. And that was interesting. I found some information about plastics in 1891. They were already investigated as an estrogen replacement, and then they abandoned it. So they knew since then that it was an estrogenic herb, or estrogenic chemical. So this is what we are poisoned by nowadays, glyphosate and Roundup. It's another name. How many of you have heard the name Roundup or glyphosate? Okay. So you'll hear more and more about it now since more people are becoming aware of it. Very, very toxic. It's used on all the crops unless they call it, unless they say it's organic, and it probably doesn't have it, unless it was carried by the rainwater. You know, there's a chance of that. It's in basically everything you eat. The potatoes are genetically modified. The tomatoes are. Now they're talking about genetically modifying apples. Pineapple is already, papaya is already genetically modified. But they all contain this Roundup chemical. Let me go a little further. So this one here, this is quite interesting finding. I started, when I do the testing, I have this German device, and I can see chemicals that show up in people, and I started seeing Agent Orange showing up in pretty much everybody that was coming in my door. And this one group of chemicals, I have probably about 300 in that group, and I run the whole group, and I keep seeing Agent Orange, and I think, wasn't that outlawed because it caused all this damage in babies, in the soldiers they were in Vietnam at the time. And they know that Agent Orange will cause deformities that can go on for several generations. And I thought, why is it showing up in everybody again? And about 8 months after that, I was doing some research and looking to see if they actually have used or approved the use of Agent Orange. And sure enough, this chemical called Enlist Duo, it's a Dow Chemical concoction. They put Roundup and Agent Orange together, and they call that Enlist Duo. Let's give it a double whammy, right? Let's kill them faster than we intended to. And so it's not little, 178 million pounds of these chemicals will be sprayed in 2015. Can you imagine how much that is? And however much more goes into the water supply, right? We'll talk about that. Very scary. Now this is Agent Orange, for those of you who remember some of the, if you Google Agent Orange and some of the deformities, you're gonna get sick that night, because the pictures that you see, kids with 3 arms and stubby knees, you always see the same kind of pictures, multiple arms, it's Agent Orange. So I don't know how they got back in the market again. And another chemical I want to bring to your attention while we're here is atrazine. It was outlawed in Europe many, many years ago. It also linked as an estrogen agenda bender, I guess we can call it. Okay, cancer-causing atrazine is the world's #1 water contaminant. That's one reason I brought it up, because we're all getting that through the water. It's completely banned in Europe in 2004. Most well-studied pesticide on the planet. Studies have linked it to low sperm count, low fertility, ovarian, breast, and prostate cancers. Syngenta, the manufacturer of atrazine, denies any link to cancer or liability, but was ordered to pay $105 million to move to more than 100 municipal water systems in the U.S. to help pay for the removal of atrazine from their drinking water. Now, I don't know how they do that, seriously. Maybe they're adding another chemical to bind it up. I'm really questioning that process, probably how they do it. So endocrine disruptors, if you just look around you when you go to Disneyland or wherever, you're going to see these endocrine disruptors. You see men with more breasts, and then this gut here, that's adipose tissue that accumulates. That's all from these endocrine chemicals. And breast cancer is on the rise. I have several patients, men that have or had breast cancer, which I've never, had to deal with before. And endocrine disruptors also cause an abnormal deposition of fat, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. That's why when you start drinking the water, a lot of people say, I didn't change my diet or anything. My friend lives in Miami. He's an architect, and I told him, I said, you don't eat good, but at least you could drink the water. So he bought a common water machine, and I haven't heard from him in like 3 months. He went on a job in Colorado, and all of a sudden I get an email. He said, I didn't really change my diet because I was so busy doing this. He said, but I did faithfully drink the water. I drank close to 2 gallons a day, 1.5 gallons to 2 a day, and I lost 33 pounds. And that explains it, because there's so many chemicals in fatty tissue. When you start drinking the water, the fats are very acidic and the chemicals are acidic, so it holds and suspends the fats in the fatty tissue. It has to make more and more fat cells to hold on to the toxic waste. So as you're dropping all the toxic waste, the fat cells start shrinking and going away as well. So health consequences of something like we have these chemicals, radical increase in Alzheimer's disease. 4.6 million new cases per year. Can you imagine that? You see younger people, I see people in the 50s who already have early signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. And then 10,000 increase in autism. It used to be 1 in 2,000, now it's 1 in 43 or something like that. And a strong increase in respiratory diseases and asthma. We're breathing those chemicals in as well. Increase in neurological disorders due to heavy metal nanoparticles in the problem. But when they go to Europe, they eat 3 pieces of, now here they'll have a slice of bread, and their lips will swell, or their legs will swell, or their brain gets foggy, they can't function. They go to Europe, they eat 2-3 slices of bread and nothing happens. But if they had a gluten problem, what was that all about? They would have to react to the gluten in Europe too. But the secret is that Europe does not allow genetically modified foods. There are 43 countries in the world that do not allow genetically modified foods, except the US. Okay, so they say that if you spray glyphosate on the plants, it's a corn plant, that it absorbs only 4% of the Roundup. I've never seen a study that really, how much it absorbs. I think it absorbs more than that. But what happens to the 96% that it doesn't absorb? It gets washed out with the rains, right? Oops. And it gets, with the rains back into our soil and back into our groundwater. So water, again, gets it all. So here's a study that some of you might have seen. Genetically modified corn was fed to these rats in France. And in just 6 months, can you see the size of their tumors? Half the body size was just tumors. Okay, so how do we develop cancer? This is just a summary of what we just talked about. I think this is one of my favorite slides personally. Chemicals from food, water, environment enter the body by absorption from the gut, the small intestine and large intestine. Chemicals change the integrity of the gut, allowing bacteria, parasites, and fungus to thrive. Glyphosate or endocrine disrupting chemicals inhibit the cytochrome enzyme P450. That's a group of enzymes that detoxify the chemicals. We call them xenobiotics. This is a cancer protective enzyme. The lack of this enzyme allows the chemicals in the gut to become 100 times more toxic, and thus the gut lining is damaged and has no protective barrier. This allows the chemicals to escape to the brain and many other parts of the body, and allowing tumors to form. That's bottom line. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at some of the studies here. 2011 study detected glyphosate in 60 to 100% of all U.S. air and rain samples. The 2012 study revealed widespread glyphosate contamination in the water, basically the groundwater, that's what it should say. Somehow that picture got covered. 182 volunteers from 18 different countries were tested for glyphosate in the urine. All were city dwellers and never handled the pesticide, and 44% tested positive. Now this is all over the world, so it means the rain has carried the glyphosate all over the world too. California allows, this is from that Microage Natural News, June 2013, allows 1,000 times more glyphosate in drinking water than needed to cause breast cancer. Another glyphosate slide, I found this one recently, is an endocrine disruptor in human cells at drinking water levels. Okay, just found that one last week. So if you start looking, you'll see it everywhere. Glyphosate induces human breast cancer cells via estrogen receptors. Again, estrogen receptors means these compounds become fake estrogens, and they mimic estrogen, and it gets into the body, and the body says, oh, we're getting some estrogen, that's great. And it goes only so far in, and the body says, oops, that's not the same thing, it's something totally different. But what do we do with it? Well, we're just going to put it aside somewhere, shove it into the fat cells, and let's form tumors with it. Tumors are formed because the body's trying to isolate it from the rest of the tissues, which is a great protective mechanism from the body. He says, what happens with these tumors then? Nothing. They just sit there until they turn cancerous, right? So any kind of fibrocystic breasts, fibrocystic ovaries, fibroids in the uterus, whatever myomas they're called sometimes, is all a sign of estrogen dominance, and it's only a matter of time it's going to turn into a cancer. So be aware of that. So you need to treat that, you need to cleanse the tissues. In the clinic we use a lot of herbs, that's dim vegetables, right? The broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, those things that help to turn these bad estrogens around and hopefully detoxify you and reduce the size of the tumors. We also use some great Chinese herbs in the clinic that really help with this situation, because we get them when it's like 5 minutes before surgery or something like that. You know, we have to act quickly to turn this around. So just be aware. But you have to also be aware when you use a lot of these cruciferous vegetables, like broccoli, cabbage, and all that, they can slow your thyroid down. So you can, you know, your thyroid might be a little bit compromised. You know, so you have to do it somewhat in moderation too. Just make sure everything's organic, okay? All right, so glyphosate has been linked to all these things already: autism, allergies, destruction of the intestinal lining, gastrointestinal diseases, colitis, Crohn's, inflammatory bowel, we talked about that, and all the breast cancers, of course, infertility, obesity, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. It's just a review of what we just talked about. So this is what happened to Michelangelo, right? He's going to return to Italy now because of the gender system. Everyone knows the statue of Michelangelo in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I love that one. Each person in the U.S. consumes about 290 pounds of pesticides and other chemicals, residues per year. This is from the environmental group. This is a very good organization that informs people about the environment. And also the Organic Consumers Association, I always endorse them. They do great work. Nonprofit organization that helps to educate people and help us to pass labeling laws so the GMO foods would be labeled. You know, has been extremely successful. Got defeated in California, got defeated in Oregon. It passed in Vermont, but now they are trying to countersue the state of Vermont for passing the labeling law. You know, and it's coming up in New England. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's coming up in Florida too. So, you know, if you go to the Organic Consumers Association, you can either donate some money to help them educate people and help pass the labeling laws, because Monsanto, the big giant corporation of biotech, in the biotech industry, is very powerful, and they always pledge millions of dollars to make sure that these labeling laws get defeated. Okay. So 1 billion pounds of pesticides are sprayed in the United States yearly. See that? So Monsanto has been removed and banned by all these countries here, and I think I mentioned that before, 43 countries. You know, Hungary had some seeds from Monsanto, and they realized they were genetically modified. They didn't know it before, so they burned all those fields so they wouldn't contaminate the rest of the fields. So these are some estrogenic foods you want to be aware of. Some of these foods are naturally estrogenic already, so we already consume them, and then we get an estrogenic chemical compounds on top of that, we really get sick. So pesticides in conventional fruits and vegetables, soy products and corn products, sugar beets. Be aware, everything, if it has lecithin, right, that's a soy product, so you have to know where it comes from. So it's many, many things. Hormones in beef and chicken and dairy. That's why you want to go grass-fed beef and organic chicken and organic dairy, so you don't get that. All the grain-fed animal meats have that in it, of course. Farm-raised fish, they're fed all kinds of chemicals. So you want to eat wild-caught fish, even though wild-caught fish can still have mercury, right? So it's hard to totally eliminate it, but it's a better choice versus farm-raised fish. And the farm-raised fish also get lots of antibiotic baths too. I'm going to give you an example about salmon too. There's a product, or there's a substance, a nutrient, antioxidant, whatever you want to call it, in salmon. It's called astaxanthin. Well, astaxanthin is 800 times more powerful than vitamin E and C as an antioxidant. But it only comes in wild salmon, because the salmon has to eat plankton from the wild to make this astaxanthin. So if you eat a farm-raised salmon, you're not getting any astaxanthin. That's just one of the nutrients that they have identified that's not in farm-raised salmon, besides all the chemicals. And there's probably many others that, you know, we're not even aware of yet until they start doing some more research about that. Okay, GMOs in our foods. Cocoa puffs, right? I had a patient, 42 years old, colon cancer. Very athletic, eats salads all the time, you know, healthy vegetables, stuff like that. Plays tennis all the time, but was eating Cocoa Puff cereal every morning for 30-some years. That's how she got a colon tumor. 75% of supermarkets are producing GMO ingredients. For the beers, you have to look at beers. They have, beer is very estrogenic to start with, but then they add all these chemicals, corn syrup and everything. They don't have to disclose the chemicals in beer like they have to disclose it on a package of food. So you really never know what you're getting. So you have to, I understand Food Babe, it's one of the girls that really is a promoter of organic and natural food, has a book out now called The Food Babe Way, where she lists companies by name, which ones don't have the GMO chemicals and all that, you know. So it's worthwhile looking into that one. Some of the German beers, you know, because they don't use genetically modified grains there, don't have GMO foods, and they don't use corn syrup there. You know. I had a patient who reacted to, you know that chocolate bar called Toblerone? It's like a triangular bar, comes from Switzerland, right? He has a reaction to that bar, but when he eats it in Europe, he doesn't. So I did some research, and I found out that the bars, when they bring them to the U.S., they put corn syrup in the U.S. or for the U.S., but they don't do it with Europe. So he only reacts to the American Toblerone bars. Now figure that out. It took me a while to figure that one out. Okay, glass of beer. Right? This is what it does, estrogenic, because all the GMO stuff in there mostly, or common water. Well, if you drink a glass of beer, you better follow up with a gallon of water. Look for these symbols. Non-GMO project verified, non-GMO, or bioorganic. So that's always your saving grace, you know? If you don't know if it has it in it, look for the non-GMO label. So how do we store these chemicals? This is a fat cell. You can see they can swell to any size they need to store fat. This is adipose tissue, right? These are fat cells. You see how they're swollen here, and it causes this little dimpling effect. That's what cellulite is all about, right? So it just keeps swelling up. Visceral fat, adipose tissue, that's all that is. Obesity costs you $167 billion annually, because obesity leads to many other diseases, heart disease and cancer and everything else. So how to protect ourselves? Let's just summarize that briefly. Avoid GMO foods, additives and preservatives, because most of them are GMO derived. Let me give you a little example here. Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? They come out of Vermont. They're actually a little cleaner ice cream than what you see. And they said that they took all the GMO chemicals out, and I'm thinking, I didn't realize that the ice cream from Ben & Jerry's had that many chemicals in it. They said they took out 92 GMO chemicals. And what it was mostly the flavors. All the flavors are genetically modified. So that's what it is.
So it's good to know.
So now they took them out, supposedly. You know, I didn't really follow through on it, but they said they took them out. So, you know, go with organic ice cream, organic coconut ice cream. So make your own. It's so easy to make your own. You know. Okay, so again, it comes back to organic food whenever possible, GMO-free labels. Exposure to and use of environmental chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, household cleaning products. I noticed that people would change their diet, but they continue using toxic chemicals in their house. You know, and it goes into the system. Had a patient that I saw when I tested, I said, all this green food color would come up everywhere I tested. And she says, I said, do you do something that has green, you know, eat something that has green? She said, no, I eat all organic food. We grow our own foods. We do this, we do that, right? She goes home, she calls me back a couple hours later. She said, I think I figured out where it's coming from. She said, I use Dawn dishwashing soap, the hand dishwashing soap. You know, it's green, right? She was absorbing it from my hands. I said, how many years have you been using it? Oh, probably 20 years. So that's where it came from. Okay, let's see. Skincare products, we talked about that. Drink plenty of microplastic oxygenated alkaline calming water to detoxify daily. You know, you have to always think, how much did I consume that was acidic, and how did I counteract that, you know? And many people still drink coffee, and there's a lot of studies out there how coffee is beneficial in many ways, but they don't talk to you about all the pesticides that are in the coffee, right? Or all the stuff you put into it. You put the creamers in there that have carrageenan in there, which is a thickener that's made from GMO chemicals. You know, they don't talk to you about it, the sugar that you put in, or the dairy products you put in that has a lot of pesticides and hormones in there, you know. So, but if you drink coffee and you drink organic coffee, you still have to counteract all that acidity with water. So your first thing in the morning is drink a big glass of water, flush out that acid waste from the body, and you'll have a really good start right away. Okay, so support the GMO labeling laws. I always promote this. Organic Consumer Association down here. They do a fabulous job helping people. And protect the health to support GMO labeling laws. Here's all the countries that don't use GMO foods. Now I'm going to tell another example about what GMO foods can do. India, you'll never hear that in national news either. They bought a lot of Monsanto's seeds to grow their crops. Well, they can't afford to, when you have Monsanto seeds, you cannot reproduce the crops. You have to buy new seeds every year. They can't afford that, so they started reproducing some of their own seeds, but they would get fined for doing that. So a lot of them went bankrupt. So India, they had 17,000 farmers that have committed suicide because they could no longer sustain their crops because of GMO seeds. And India gets chemicals, GMO products like Dorito corn chips and all that, imported, and they don't even know they're getting GMO products. And the people that are getting very sick on it, tens of thousands of people have died from using GMO chemicals that they weren't even aware they were getting. But for the first time, we get them some idea what happens to these people when they eat those chemicals. Well, the number one thing was their intestinal tract would shrink up, could no longer absorb nutrients. If they didn't die from tumors in the liver and in the kidney first. Tens of thousands of people have died from these chemicals. Okay, so I just briefly mentioned this antibacterial soap. Be aware of that. So plain soap without it in it is better. You know, water, I use my 2.5 water, put it in a little spray bottle, carry it in my pocketbook, and spray it out of my hands and wipe it with a towel. You know? So it's linked to hormone disruption, thyroid function, linked to breast cancer, affects the nervous system, degrades into highly toxic dioxins in the water, look at that, in the environment through sunlight. So it becomes more toxic as it hits the water. It's found in skincare products. You can just look at it, see where it has it. 75% of the adults in the US have significant amounts of triglyceride in the urine. They've already tested that. And here's just some that I mentioned here. There's many others that have it too. Fluoride, neurotoxin, outlawed in Europe 40 years ago. Okay, we still have it in our water. It's an aluminum byproduct used as a pesticide in China. 97% of Western Europe drinks no fluoridated water. Tooth decay is caused primarily by diet, not by lack of fluoride in the body, right? There's such a thing as fluorine. Fluorine is a mineral that comes from almonds and broccoli. It's not fluoride. Fluoride is a toxin. So it's two different things. And the fluorine in the almonds and the broccoli can help harden your teeth. Nothing to do with fluoride. Okay, then children who live in the areas of fluoridated water have significantly lower IQ scores. 40% of American teenagers show fluoride overexposure. We can read this in this book, The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson. Very good book. Effects of fluoride increases lead absorption. Now, if you drink your toxic water, you know, with fluoride, you have more lead in there. Lead is in the water anyway. Inactivates 62 enzymes and inhibits more than 100. Is linked to bone cancer, osteosarcomas, increases tumor and cancer rates, lowers thyroid function, disrupts the immune system, causes genetic damages, increases infertility, linked to dementia and hyperactivity, disrupts the collagen formation like arthritis. So I've had patients with arthritis from doing fluoridated toothpaste. Okay, found in all people in the US is perfluorinated chemicals. It's a funny name there, but it's from industrial processes, non-stick and stain-resistant food packaging, just that alone. Scientists link these chemicals to high cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, and pregnancy-induced hypertension. Treatment techniques were unsuccessful in removing these compounds from the water. They have no idea how to get it out. Okay, so how do I find these things? So I do this assessment, and I'll sit down with the patient, and they put their hand on this cradle, and it measures their frequencies. And I have frequencies stored in my system, and it runs these frequencies past the person, and it's reading what's there. If there's the same frequencies in the person, it will come up on my computer. If it's not there, it just won't come up. And it always comes up with an average score. Like an average score in this case was like a 10 or 10.32, right? So I measure everything against that score. So if that person has an average 10.32 and I find lead as 150, we have a problem with lead, right? Because you want to be as close to the number normal as you can get it. And like I said before, the worst ones that I always see is pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and heavy metals. So here's an example. So see methylmercury, 193, platinum, 173, another kind of mercury, radioactive compounds here, over 100. That's a heavy metal toxic patient. Okay, this one is pharmaceutical. So now remember the same score, 10 something, right? 10 is average. 974 on aspirin. 189 on some other chemicals, and they're all listed here. I tell you the truth, I don't know them all. I look some of them up, and the other ones I said, just the same old thing, you know, chemicals and toxins and pesticides. But that's how high these numbers can be. It's incredible. So my personal first experience with the calming water was that I actually saw it pull this chemical out. I was testing a patient for 18 years, and he came in one day, and his numbers were pretty average, pretty normal, and he came in one day, the numbers jumped to like 300 and 400. So I said, what are you doing? You're remodeling your house or something? Because I'm across the score, I'm seeing high numbers. And he goes, no, I haven't done anything different. He said, although, he said, I started drinking this new water. He said, it's supposed to be a structured water. Do you think that could do that? And immediately I thought, is your wife drinking it too? He goes, yes. I said, let me test her. So I tested her, and I found the same thing in her. The numbers have quadrupled or more. They, jumped from like 30, 40 to 300, 400 all of a sudden, right? So I brought them back every month, and I tested them. And each month the numbers would go down, 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 down. After about 3.5, 4 months, they were almost back to normal again. So that's the only time I've seen the water do that was with the Kangen water. And then I said, and then he left me a gallon of water, and I had a patient come in after him, and she had stomach problems with H. pylori and pain for 3 weeks, So as I'm testing her, she said, what are you drinking? I said, well, I have a friend who brought me some water, I'm just trying it out. She said, can I have a glass? I said, sure, Gave a glass of water, and she didn't say anything. And then when she was done, she came back to my office, she said, whatever water you gave me, my pain is gone for the first time in 3 weeks. So that's my first patient. Second patient comes in, wants to get an appointment, has a tumor on the thyroid, and I couldn't get him in because I was booked like 2 months in advance. So I said, you know what, I felt bad for him. I said, gotta do something, can't let the tumor sit there, And I said, come in every day, just pick up a couple gallons of water, So he came in, and I saw him like 2.5 weeks later, and he says, guess what? He said, my thyroid tumor has shrunk to more than half. So that was my second experience, okay? So it's just so one thing after another happened where I said, there's not many things that can do that. So then I actually got a patient involved who was a NASA scientist. He was an expert in nuclear, I'm trying to remember exactly. He had something to do with I can't remember the exact title, but it had to do with the fuels, an expert with fuel in the NASA space station, worked there for many, many years. So I said, can you take the machine and examine it and let me know what you find? And then I got a water treatment expert of 40 years, told him the same thing. We got a quantum physicist that told him the same thing. And after all of them examined the machine, every one water machine, they said that's the only water I would ever drink. And it was this NASA physicist actually told me, he said, if you had to buy, see that the machine is so solid, it has solid plates, the water ionization is so perfect, they said it would be hard to duplicate that. He said, plus the fact, if you had to buy those titanium plates, street market value, you would pay $4,000 for the titanium that they have in those plates. So that's how solidly this machine is made. And he gave me a comparison chart of 28 machines that he had looked at. So we knew we had a good thing at that point. So that's my story, how I actually got involved with time. Okay, let's go a step further. There's just some more chemicals there. I think we'll come back. But the reason I put this there, now remember, see this T4D? That's Agent Orange. That's the new name for it. So if you see that name anywhere, it's Agent Orange. And it was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th one on a list of 300, right? So let's talk a little bit about chlorination of the water. Chlorination eliminates disease-causing bacteria but creates really toxic byproducts. They are called trihalomethanes. Another one, iodinacetic acid, is a disinfection product found in U.S. drinking water. It's considered the most toxic chemical ever found. How many people hear about that one? Right? Nothing. It's linked to cancer of the bladder, stomach, pancreas, kidney, and rectum. Also linked to Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Everywhere we read these chemicals, bottom line is cancer, right? Prescription medicine in fish. This was a picture from the National Geographic 2 or 3 years back. Contaminants of the Great Lakes. Only half of the drugs and other newly emerging contaminants are removed from sewage. Over 1,500 wastewater treatment plants in the US and Canada discharge 4.8 billion gallons of untreated effluent into the Great Lakes every day. Most commonly found drugs are antibiotics, cholesterol drugs, antidepressants, anti-inflammatories, seizure drugs, and estrogens, like hormones. Environmental health news. I think I lost the date on that, but I'll have to restore that. Most common pollutants are water, again, is things we talked about, chemicals, pharmaceutical drugs, personal care products. These are the 3 top ones, then the heavy metals. Then radioactive metals, that's the latest one. I've been seeing a lot of that. I finally did some research. Where are these coming from, you know? Where does everybody have these? Agricultural runoffs, animal and human feces, bacteria and parasites, viruses, stormwater, drainage, and sewage, and GMO chemicals. So here's a list of them. We'll talk a little bit more about the radioactive metals in a minute here. And the effect on our health, of course, they interfere with all the normal biological processes in the body. It causes endocrine changes, female eggs, and taking on male characteristics, reproductive disorders. GMO chemicals are linked with other chemicals and become 1,000 times more toxic, okay? And we know that already. So restoring and keeping on health depends on these 2 things, coming back to nourishment and water. So what type of water is needed to break the strong chemical bonds of these extremely strong chemicals? It takes an ionization process actually to break these chemical bonds. They're so strong that nothing will get it out. Nothing will get fluoride out of your water. That's why it always stays there. So if you have fluoride on a toothpaste, I was talking to the scientist, he said if you put 1 drop on there, that's all you can put on there to not become toxic from it. Well, you know, we put a whole strip of fluoride toothpaste on there. Okay, this is glacial water, so you can recognize the color of these waters so much lighter. That's what I grew up with. In fact, one of these pictures, I think, is the next one up. Let's see. So this was taken in my hometown. See the bluish look? My family lives about half an hour from that place there. And you can see the water, you can see 30 feet deep into the ground. You can see all the way down on top of that water. See, that's that lake that you can see all the way down. In the United States, all our water comes from treatment plants and they dump it into the rivers. There was something they discovered recently in England. They said ibuprofen they think causes a lot of feminization of fish. But there's many others they do too, but it's one they're looking at right now, right? And they said, okay, if there's so many people living along the edge of this river, that means they said there's 22 million people living along this river. So consequently, we have to find so much ibuprofen so many miles down the river. It's a computerized model that they were using. So they actually tested it. They went down to the end of the river where they said, you know, they should find this much ibuprofen. And whatever the computer said is exactly what they found in that riverbed on ibuprofen because of all the urine going into the river, the treatment plants dumping all it back in and then ibuprofen not breaking down, you know. So that was just one chemical. This is city water pipe, a picture that my son found on the internet. I thought it was really cool. Glacial waters promote longevity and true health. We know that by now. It has the ability to carry all these things. That's why they're so healthy. Minerals, oxygen, they carry energetic imprints of the earth. We talk a little bit more about that. Carries vital health-giving information and it has memory too. So the properties of glacial water carries a multitude of minerals of the earth. It has bipolar molecules, hydrogen and oxygen, Hydrogen has a positive charge and oxygen a negative charge. And this forms a crystal-like structure that makes it look like a little crystal. Biological in nature, means whatever the body needs, it fits it. It has a low surface tension of 45 dynes. Okay, ordinary water has a surface tension of 73. It's been found to have 90 dynes. Okay, so 45 is a low surface tension. So when it has a low surface tension, it can really penetrate your body. So it can penetrate the fatty and protein layer of the cells. Now I've had cases when a patient would come in and have a gallon of water there, and as I'm testing, she's drinking a gallon of water. By the time I was done, the gallon was gone and she was still thirsty. Could not get hydrated because she's drinking a water that just was not reaching the cells at all. Okay, so next one. This is the microplasters. You know, they're just really low surface tension. Basically means microplasters to me means basically a low surface tension. That's all that is.
I think you skipped one slide.
Oh yeah, they're talking about Dr. Flanagan saying thank you. Just keep it over. Dr. Flanagan was a child prodigy. Okay, so we got to that. So there's your counting water ionization. And Dr. Coenda, he's a doctor from Hungary, from Romania, sorry. He's the inventor of fluid dynamics. He's the first inventor of snow-making machines. He opened the first ski resort in 1920 in France. He researched water for 60 years. He lived with the Hansa people most of his life. So he studied the centenarians, and he said although they had all a different diet, some were meat eaters, heavy eaters, some were vegetarians, you know, they had a totally different diet. What made the difference is he said that the water that they drank, that's what gave them the longevity. Unpolluted, you know, glacial waters. Okay, who's that? Oops. No, that's not all, but okay. So this is Dr. Moda. Many of you have probably heard of him. He died recently, pneumonia, I believe, but he did a lot of research with water. He said water has memory, and he would take water and freeze it, and then take pictures of these crystal-like structures. And you can see how beautiful these crystals are. And if we look at distilled water and river water, that's what it looked like when he would freeze it, okay? And then last one, tap water. Who would ever want to drink that? So he wrote several books. They were translated into 80-some languages. Very good information in it. Okay, so other major chemical sleds, we'll talk a little bit more about this one. You talk about fracking. This is the latest thing. So it puzzled me for years why people would come in with all this nuclear waste in their body, right? And nuclear waste is so toxic that you need just a millionth of a gram sometimes to get a cancer. And if it gets in your body and you don't have anything there that repels it, you will instantly have cancer. So I was looking into this. I keep getting information about fracking, and I started looking into it a little bit more. I found out that what they do with fracking, they take abandoned mines, and what they call the wells, okay? And they will pump this nuclear waste underground that's supposed to be between 500 and 1,000 feet. And I found that it's usually never 1,000 feet, it's always somewhere around 500 feet. Well, that's just a little bit below the water table. And they've been doing that since 1965, and millions of gallons are pumped underground like this every year. Well, after so many years, that stuff is going to come back out through the water table. That's what hydraulic fracking is. Some of you might have probably heard about that. So here's just a couple of pictures, you know. And these pictures, the people that were involved with fracking, I mean, they were getting extremely toxic just pumping that stuff underground. They had to wear masks and everything, but they were dying left and right just by pumping that stuff under the ground. So this is how, you know, see some of these elements: dysprosium, germanium, arsenic, europium, you know, those are barium, those are radioactive compounds. You know, see high numbers there. Here's more praseodymium. You know, we ever heard of praseodymium, rubidium, erbium, uranium, samarium? Right? Crazy. And here's some more, here's another one. I think it's the same one actually. Disposal of nuclear waste. The U.S. government is disposing approximately 250,000 gallons of intermediate level waste each year using this hydraulic fracking. There are upwards of 2 million abandoned and plugged oil gas wells in the U.S., more than 100,000 do not appear in regulated records. So there's a lot more that we don't even know. fracking since 1960, and this is one of the fracking plants, Union Carbide Corporation, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, dumps 4 million tons of waste fission products, strontium, cesium, ruthenium into underground shale 500,000 feet below the Earth's crust. Guess who owns this Union Carbide Corporation? Dow Chemical. Water contamination. So fracking links to contamination of public water supply and critical aquifers, as well as ties to earthquake upticks near drilling locations that otherwise not prone to seismic activity. This is in True Stream Media, March 2015. Since the start of the atomic era in the 1940s, nuclear reactors around the nation have produced 75 million gallons of hazardous high-level waste materials. Another one, Associated Press investigation of 2011. 48 of 65 nuclear sites in the U.S. were leaking tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen, into groundwater supplies via corroding pipes and tunnels. 37 were in direct violation of federal drinking water standards, in some cases hundreds of times over. And these are all the sites, he just agreed that I was able to find. Isn't that crazy? So are we ready for this? This engineer, Marisol, is a technical expert for 25 years with EPA's injection program in Washington. This is what he said. In 10 to 100 years, we are going to find out that most of our groundwater is polluted. A lot of people are going to get sick, and a lot of people may die. Wow. And the thing is, you know, that every well and water that they actually tested for nuclear waste now, they are finding this nuclear waste in every well. And you think, well, I have well water, you know, so much cleaner water. You don't even know what's in there. So you get nuclear waste. I love this slide. See, it says here, look, son, this will be all yours one day. Chemtrails, not a quick one. You know, these chemtrails are deliberately placed in the atmosphere. If you have a vapor from a plane, it diffuses within a very short period of time. But if you have chemtrails, they don't go away for like 20-some hours, and they can get 4 miles wide. And this picture right here that you see, I took in Florida, actually, of our train station that we have there. When you start looking, you're going to see these chemtrails coming up everywhere. And this is a chemtrail plane. This is a chemtrail nozzles that they're spraying. They're spraying aluminum and barium and other chemical compounds. And you can look into yourself. It has a lot to do with controlling the weather. I don't want to say any more, but it's big business. They're spraying these chemicals, see, barium, strontium, lithium, all the things that, you know, I showed you on my slides that I find, right? Mount Shasta holds 1,200 times the normal level of aluminum due to chemical spraying. So where's it coming from? It's just the air, right? Nobody took it up there and dumped it. Okay, aluminum barium found in rainbow. This was February 2010. Here's a website that talks about this a lot, realityzone.com /angels.html. 10 to 20 million metric tons of aluminum were released in the atmosphere in 2010. Aluminum, very high for Alzheimer's. Aluminum does suggest a prominent role for the olfactory system and lungs in the accumulation of aluminum in the brain. Inhaling aluminum dust vapor sends aluminum particles directly into your lungs and are distributed throughout your body, including your bones and your brain. Aluminum linked to neurological diseases, dementia, autism, Parkinson's, asthma, pulmonary fibrosis, breast cancer, and high levels of neurotoxicity. Rain washes aluminum particles out of the air into our water supply. Now, we have a problem in Florida. They call it the greening disease. And it means that the fruit doesn't ripen on the trees. It's been going on for the last 2 years. And it's happening because these aluminum particles are everywhere. They're getting into the water, and the trees cannot absorb the nutrients efficiently, so it can never complete the ripening process of the fruits on the tree. Wow. So we're already starting to see the effects of that. Radioactive metals, some injury health, we talked about that. This is a picture I got from the flu from Fukushima when it first happened, just 3 months later. See that in the water? Wow. March 2012. Most deadly radioactive metals, if you look at plutonium, a few millionth of a gram is needed to cause cancer. And I see it all the time. Radiation in fish, they're bleeding from the gills. And this is a general environmental disaster now. 200 animal and plant species going extinct every day. Heavy metal dust is covering all Earth's crust, rivers, and ocean bottoms. Plankton supplies 60% of our oxygen, 50% has died off. Massive fish destruction is due to lack of plankton growth. Aluminum is found in all river waters across the world, irreversible once it's in the waterways. Destruction of ozone layers, solar heat, and chemical dust destroying plant life, food for animal species and humans. Creation of abnormal flora, fungal and bacterial overgrowth, prions, those are like bad bacteria that grow, parasites causing more disease. We are drinking and not hydrating. We're drinking too many acidic beverages. So eating too many carbohydrates, denatured proteins, environmental contaminants getting our food and water. So drinking water is very polluted. We need to do something. We need to look for this kind of structured water. I think you know that. So here's some health-giving properties of water. This is what it should do, and this is all that common water can do, just like a glacial water, right? We already know that now. And water carries nutrition to the cells. So that's bottom line. And I want to show you some pictures of my orchids. They love the common water. When I get an orchid, the blossom just double in size. You can see the hydration effect of that water. Right? So every farm will face a catastrophic illness. Remember, 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 men will get cancer by the year 2020. So you're gonna do something now, not wait till later. So now eat this and drink clean water, or face this later. So clean water is needed. All right, that'll be the end. Let's see, oops. Just want to show you, this is building we're in Lake Mary in Orlando, in case you wonder where my business is. We have 10,000 square feet of holistic services under one roof. It was always my dream to put everything, because if people put toxic chemicals on their skin, it ends up in their body, in their liver, and everywhere too. So I want to put everything. We have organic skincare, organic this, organic that, organic stores, everything under one roof. And here's just a list of all the things that we do there. You can find us on I have a website called holisticoptionsinc.com. I think I listed it on the bottom there. If you're interested, you can look us up on the website. And I have a book out. This is the first edition. I'm coming out with a second edition soon on the missing link in health. A lot of stuff that we discussed today, the fracking, some information like this, all new information. I'll be putting that into the second book. But I have a few books left that I brought with me. So if you're interested in getting some books, they'll be out there at the table. So that's hopefully all good information that you can pass on. Like I said, you won't see that on national news, I think. But if you have friends and family, it's up to you to educate them. I always look at, if I just save one more person and let them see what the picture is, what it's really all about, it's well worth it. So I hope you can take this information and pass it on as much as you can.
Mojka, I have a question to ask. Is
Yes.
nothing being done regarding the GMO and the pesticides? Is there no group that exists that is fighting this?
The only one that I know that's fighting the GMO chemical is the Organic Consumers Association. They take donations and they help to pass labeling laws. They haven't been very successful yet, other than Vermont. They did pass it. Actually, Monsanto is proposing a new law now. We call it the Dark Act, because it's keeping consumers in the dark, so that no state will be able to propose the labeling law again if that law passes.
Really?
We'll really be in trouble then. So look at, I highly encourage you to look at organicconsumers.org. You'll get really good information from that website. Yes?
Can you just talk about there's the issue with drinking the water and the stomach acid? I think it's pretty common.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Now, everybody says you shouldn't be drinking, this strong alkaline water when you need to have an acid stomach when you're eating, right? It's really true. It's just that you can drink the water up to, 5-10 minutes before you start eating. When you eat, just the first bite that you make will stimulate hydrochloric acid production in your stomach. And that's going to actually stimulate the release of enzymes. And hydrochloric acid is needed to process protein. So most people are way too acidic all the time. The stomach is too acidic. So you should drink the water, lots of it. But when you're eating, you should not be drinking anything anyway. But if you're thirsty, it means your body needs some water to process all the protein too. So you need some. It will never change that. It's not true that you can't drink all this alkaline water because it's going to dilute the hydrochloric acid. The only time you need hydrochloric acid is if you really start eating. Prior to that, you need tons of alkalinity all the time. So you don't have to worry about that. You know, that's always a big argument. Oh, I'm going to drink all this alkaline water. It's going to destroy all my acid. You know, 90% of people are very acid all the time. That's when you want to drink the water. That's why people have stomach ulcers when they drink the water. You know, they immediately feel better because it cuts all that acid, you know. So use common sense. If you're thirsty, you want to drink some. You don't want to, you know, slush down a whole gallon while you're eating, for sure. But if you have to have a small glass of water with it, it's necessary. Okay, anybody any other questions? Do we have time for questions? Yes.
When you buy organic, do you assume it's also non-GMO?
Usually it is, yeah. If they disclose that, you know, if it's certified organic, it's even better. But a lot of companies don't have the money to certify organically. Like if we get foods from Europe, they're organic, but they can't put the label certified organic because it's not USDA certified. You know, so it's tricky. But usually it is, except for the water, because you know, you don't know, they might still be using the same toxic water to spray on all their crops too, so you're going to get some of it. But it makes a big difference if you get everything GMO, or at least, you know, your food is grown organically with a little bit of water residue from GMO chemicals. It makes a big difference in the long run.
So can you clarify for me the GMO chemicals that are put in the seeds are to what? To make them still?
They do that to make the crops more resistant, so they can use 100 times more pesticides, you know, without killing the plant, right? And you know, there's a big debate right now with autism and the wheat. The wheat, before it goes into seed, is sprayed 40 times with GMO chemicals so that it opens up quicker and it gives a higher yield. But that makes the wheat, you know, also 100 times more toxic. And, you know,